Everybody, so we got another episode here. Got my good buddy Jeff Dumbreck.
In work mode,
Yeah, work mode. He's got his work shirt on there. All good.
nice and dirty.
Perfect. Let's rock and roll. Okay, so today we're gonna look at Aerosmith. So I kind of pushed this one on Jeff because I'm such a big Aerosmith fan, but I thought these Bruce Fairbairn albums was a tie-in to Loverboy, and also it's kind of a cool Canadian theme since Bruce Fairbairn is Canadian. Um, okay, so just a really brief history of Aerosmith. So they started in Boston in the early '70s. Their first record was self-titled, 1973. Wasn't a big success when it came out. It was pretty rough sounding, but it did have "Dream On," which is probably their most critically acclaimed song. Then they entered what I would call their golden period, which was Get Your Wings, Toys in the Attic, and Rocks. So 74, 75, 76. I would say that these are 10 out of 10 albums, the greatest Aerosmith records. I would say they're up there, the top rock and roll albums of all time. I would go that far. Yeah.
That's a bold statement, Jimmy.
Oh yeah. Now this sort of creative zenith wouldn't last very long. The band, I think Joe Perry said, we were musicians dabbling in drugs, and then we became drug addicts that dabbled in music. So then the next three records were pretty drugged out, and I think most people will say that great moments on some of them, but Draw the Line, Night in the Ruts, and Rock in a Hard Place is definitely not their best material. Although I will say that Night in the Ruts is a sleeper record. I think that's an amazing album. So the band got so bad that the Joe Perry and Brad Whitford left in the early '80s. So Rock in a Hard Place only has three of the original members on that record. So basically, the band was about to completely implode, but they decided, most probably management said, you got to get your act together. So they got the band back together again. So the band reformed with the two original guitar players. They got new management. They got a new label. So they went on to Geffen, and they got a new producer, Ted Templeman, who is famous for the Doobie Brothers and Van Halen. And they got clean too. So the next record, Done with Mirrors, I guess, done with drug paraphernalia, and that album, in my opinion, is fantastic. So it was, I think it's an artistic comeback for the band, but it didn't do well. So the band was kind of, in a good and bad spot. It's like, okay, we're back together, we're clean, things are kind of good, but we need a hit. So then, I guess a miracle came around the corner, and Rick Rubin hooked up Aerosmith with Run DMC. I don't know exactly how that went about, but they basically released an old Aerosmith song called "Walk This Way" with Run DMC doing the rap on it.
If I could interject,
Yep.
Both Run DMC and Aerosmith wanted nothing to do with that. It was Rick Rubin who really pushed for it.
Interesting.
Run DMC that was a high point of their career. Okay. And they were thinking, like, why do we have to do a song with Aerosmith? This is stupid. Like, we're on top right now. And they considered Aerosmith has-been rockers.
Okay.
But Rick Rubin was just a huge fan and knew that the rap rock thing would work. And Aerosmith kind of thought that rap, they're like, fuck this is a fad. Why are we doing this? We're still a good band. We're not over the hill. So they both did it reluctantly.
Okay.
And Run DMC wanted to do they wanted, if they were going to use the Walk This Way beat, they wanted to do their own rap on it, but Rick Rubin said, no, you got to do like the Steven Tyler lyric, because it actually sounds like he's rapping.
Yep. They
reluctantly did it. Now, huge success, and they're both bands are very happy that they did it. But at the time, it caused a lot of problems for both bands. they appeared separately in the studio. Like they weren't. There was no camaraderie going on. They didn't. There was no high fiving or anything. Uh, I think, yeah, they were both a little bit upset that they had to work with each other. Anyways,
But it was
that's
pretty. So it is a pretty symbolic music video. If you see the music video, both bands are in two separate rooms. I guess they're kind of in their own rehearsal spaces, and they're kind of like they're annoyed by the loudness of each room. But then I guess eventually the wall is broken down, and then they're both on stage together, and they're both happy. So yeah, so maybe that was the symbolic video.
that is kind of how it happened. I know that it took a long time to get the beat's pretty simple, right? It's just a drum track.
Yep.
With the Joe Perry had to do the guitar over again. Rick Rubin didn't test his patience too much. Like he only did a few takes to get it all done. It was like the Aerosmith portion of the song happened pretty quickly. Although Steven Tyler his vocal took a little longer, but Joe Perry was having none of it. And his guitar, he went in and just did the solo pretty much, and because he was the one that really didn't want to be there.
Okay.
Steven Tyler, I think, was a little more swayed by the fact that it would be a big financial. You know what I mean? It would. He is a real rocker, but I think he's more swayed with the money, and he knew that it would be a payday if he's working with Rick Rubin, or that he knew that this song might get him on the charts, and was a little more. So he gave his vocal his all, but
cool. Okay. So yeah, so I guess so this song was the was the catalyst that it's like, oh, okay, so it's a hit, so the band is relevant now. So they're able to go forward with confidence, probably had the label fully behind them now to get the hottest producer at the time, which was Bruce Fairbairn. He just finished Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi, and that was doing very well as well. So it also, Bruce Fairbairn and Bob Rock and all these Canadian guys in Vancouver, they were doing so well at the time that it kind of became this thing. It's like, if you want to be successful, you got to move to Vancouver and try harder. Like that was the I guess the expression that this guy Martin Popoff likes to always say. So Aerosmith, of course, did that. It's like, okay, we got to move to Vancouver and just try really hard. And I think Vancouver is probably good too, because it was away from all the riffraff of the States, maybe away from their friends, maybe away from drugs potentially, So Vancouver was kind of a good sort of isolation as well, I think, for these rock guys. So then Permanent Vacation, I guess, was finished in '87. Huge success. Put Aerosmith back on the rock map. They made them relevant again. They could, kind of play alongside Guns N' Roses and all these other guys like Bon Jovi, and they could fit in with all these rock bands again. And and they did it again with Pump. Another massive success. I don't think Bob Rock engineered Pump, but Bruce Fairbairn again. And then Get a Grip. Get a Grip was quite an accomplishment for the fact that that Aerosmith was able to stay relevant even in the '90s, even during that whole alternative grunge thing. That was rare, because most of these '80s hair bands were just getting eaten alive. But Get a Grip was a massive success. So
I think there's only two bands of that era. The only two bands that I can remember that were as successful after grunge were Depeche Mode and Aerosmith.
Yeah.
They didn't see any waning in their popularity. They still toured to huge audiences.
Yeah.
And I remember that there was, the diehard rockers always, they still love Def Leppard and Motley Crue, but, you would never, ever hear a Def Leppard song on the radio later than 1992. right? Once
Yeah,
Nirvana broke, it was over for those guys. Mind you, all those bands, they might have, like Def Leppard had the acoustic one. Fuck that was on the Last Man Standing soundtrack with Alice in Chains and anyway, some of them had hits, but it wasn't the same anymore. And you're right, Aerosmith just no sign of slowing down for them.
actually, I will say the other band that did very well in the '90s was actually Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi did very well. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, keep the faith, kind
you're
of.
right. You're right. I
But
forgot about that.
the album after that, man, that was a huge record.
Yeah, Lay You Down in a Bed of Roses, I think
Oh
was
my
was
God,
1992.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well into the '90s, they did well too, and even at the end of the '90s too. I think with "Have a Nice Day," right? Or no, not "Have a Nice Day."
Bounce.
It's My Life.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and now I think The Secret. I think these guys kind of stumbled on The Secret. It really was ballads, right? Really
Yeah, yeah.
push a really good, well written ballad. Because ballads are kind of more universal. I think maybe it's a more cross marketing thing. You get it's not
Let's be honest. You drop the ballad, and the ladies tend to like the ballads a little more, right? And then you get the ladies coming to the show, and then the fellas come too, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this comes to the whole point of this episode. We're just going to figure out what our favorite Bruce Fairbairn produced Aerosmith album is. So it's basically the three: Permanent Vacation, Pump, and Get a Grip. And I let you go first, Jeff.
Okay, so I listened to all three of these, and again, I wasn't familiar with them as albums. I was never, like you said, I was not an Aerosmith fan. The one thing I definitely hear in these albums is the production is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Uh, Man, Bruce Fairbairn is on fire. Like the sound of the records is massive.
Yeah.
So great sound. Man, that man is definitely worth all the money they pay him. So the other thing I personally found is that I really did find them to be a singles band, and also how you said that they maintained their popularity in the '90s. They did all the right things. Like you said, they must have had management behind them. They paid big money for videos that had the popular stars of the day, like Alicia Silverstone and Crying, and I remember their videos were huge.
Yeah.
And this was, like you said, still during the Smells Like Teen Spirit and Jeremy and all those videos, like all of the biggest videos of the day. Aerosmith was right beside them.
Yeah.
And so Permanent Vacation was the first one, right, from '87.
'87. Yeah.
um I'm gonna say honestly, there's not very much that stood out for me on that. um Again, the singles are the things I remember more than anything else. But Angel, Ragdoll, and Dude Looks Like a Lady are all three of them not my personal favorites at all.
Mhm.
So, looking at the song titles, there's nothing else that sticks out to me on that one. If we go next to Pump from '89. Now, Pump has one of the best album covers I've ever seen, too.
Oh yeah.
With the two trucks, looks like they're fucking each other. That is an awesome cover. So definitely, that definitely is worth noting. I don't really think people care about that kind of shit nowadays, but like artwork and stuff like that are what draws. I mean, it's what would draw you in at the record store, and that is great artwork. Especially even down to the fact that I love old trucks like that too. Like I love like 1930s pickups.
Yeah.
So that is an awesome, awesome cover. And just like remember you showed me that cover with Joe Perry in the boardroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great cover as well. But that is one of the best album covers I've ever seen. Uh, and I mean of all records ever.
Wow. Okay.
So
Okay.
honorable mention to Aerosmith.
Cool. Actually, Jeff, maybe is it possible to just turn the light on there in the room there? It just kind of keeps going dark.
Better?
Yeah, it's a little better. Yeah,
Is
there you
that
go.
better? There
Yeah,
we go.
yeah,
Okay. Um, so Pump aside, we're going to go next was the next one on the list was
get a grip.
sorry, just let me find it here, James. Get a grip. So again, the album cover is interesting, although to be honest, I've always thought like I have an aversion to it. To be honest, I don't really like. I mean, they probably really did pierce that cow's nipple, and I have a. To be honest, I have a fear of needles.
Yeah.
So something like that. Although I do recognize it as cool,
Yeah.
I don't particularly like it, and the tattoo or the branding almost.
Yeah, it is kind of cruelty to animals, eh? For sure. Yeah.
But like that's. I certainly remember like I remember it standing out at the record store though, so I mean it worked.
Yeah.
Eat the Rich is a very good song. I almost can't really tell if it's satire because he's on the side of the common man, or whether he's kind of poking fun at the fact that now they are the rich.
Yeah.
But I really did like that one.
Cool.
I honestly have to say that I really have to lean towards. I really have to lean towards Pump just because I love that album cover so much. But hear me out. I really do find them a singles band. There was very little on any of those albums that I flat out didn't like. Like I could listen to those albums, and I think I should maybe listen to more Aerosmith. Um, I'll be honest, I would have liked to have listened to them more because I listened to them each once through, and I had a very busy week last week, and I would have liked to have made a more decisive, uh, not letting it. My decisive factors were the fact that I love the Pump album cover.
So it was a positive.
There was nothing in any of those albums I particularly didn't like. Get a Grip had Eat the Rich, which was a surprisingly good song that I had never heard before. But the downside to Get a Grip was that Crying was such a big song, and so like the video was just it was on heavy rotation on Much Music and MTV. And honestly, even though Alicia Silverstone was my high school crush, I got very tired of that song and video. So it's just a personal thing. I'm also going to say too that if we're going to get down to brass tacks, I think I do like older Aerosmith more, like Sweet Emotion. That would most definitely be my favorite Aerosmith track ever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of mine too, for sure.
Like I just think the track was nothing against Bruce Fairbairn. I mean, he really did a great job with these bands, and that I really didn't know that they were as bluesy a band as. I mean, I know the big rock, like the big huge rock songs. They're a very bluesy band too, which I like, and Two other things to note. Again, not a big Steven Tyler vocal fan, but that man can sing.
Yeah.
There is no denying that he can belt it out with the absolute best of them. And not only that, he can hit the highs too. He is a tremendous vocalist that I don't very often give credit to.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I really noticed is Joe Perry really, you really do hear that they are a true dynamic duo, those two. And Joe Perry has his stamp over all of those albums. And nobody ever mentions Joe Perry in the top 10 guitar players ever, but that guy has some mad skills. And
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
from just the huge riffs, and he can wail too. He can really get down. And in terms of technical playing, he's definitely got the skills as well. Like in terms of finger picking, he's more of a riff guy, I know, but I was very much impressed by his guitar playing as a whole. Whereas I was impressed by Steven Tyler's vocals, but I mean, I always kind of knew he was a really good singer, and he's just not my cup of tea. But Joe Perry, I never really gave him too much of the time of day, and my eyes have really been opened up. He is a tremendous guitar player, and I really do think he deserves a little more credit in the list of, everyone says Slash and Kirk Hammett and Eddie Van Halen. There's a lot of people, and I've never heard anybody even mention Joe Perry in the list of guitar greats. But he's definitely deserves his place up there for sure.
Yeah.
So
Brad's also a very good lead player too. Like you're probably hearing Brad as well because they both do leads.
they both do leads. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out because they both have very similar styles. Joe plays a little more, but Brad has some amazing solos too. Yeah,
I had no idea.
yeah.
I thought Joe was pure lead and the other guy was rhythm.
No, they're both kind of like that's one thing I like about Aerosmith is that both guys the rhythm and the lead thing is really blurred because they interplay off each other quite a bit. So it's not like they're both just playing the same riff and that's it. It's just doubled. Usually they're always playing something different. So it's kind of like two parts of a riff, or it's like a riff that can only be uh, heard as two separate parts played together. So it's pretty cool. Like like Aerosmith's always been really good for that. They have a lot of really interesting guitar lines going on the whole time. Yeah.
So I'm going to say Eat the Rich was a very pleasant surprise in terms of uh, Get a Grip.
Cool.
If I also had to pick, if I had to pick one of their schmaltzy ballads that is something that's a little more memorable for me, it would probably be Angel.
Yep.
But there you go. There's my take on Aerosmith. So, and one more thing too, not to keep dwelling on this album cover because I know that may seem a bit silly, but they're a good album cover really does draw somebody in. It makes you want to listen to it. And I mean, maybe that's not the case nowadays because things are all digital, but I can distinctly remember going to record stores and seeing that and always be drawn to it. And I can think of other like really cool. It's just one in a list of really cool album covers that I have always remembered my entire life and have been memorable. And I mean, that's the way that people bought records back in the day. Like when you went into a store, when there was a big thing in the window selling, like when a new album came out and that's what they were pushing. A cool album cover is what sold you. I think, unless if you knew nothing about a band and you just saw a cover, you'd be drawn to it. So anyway, I'm glad to see that Aerosmith obviously had a lot of money behind them in those days, and they did everything right. They had the right producer, the right artists. They had the right stylists. They were hiring the right people to make the videos. So it's no secret that they were so successful.
Yeah. So which
Very little.
so which album of the three would you pick as the standout? Pump?
I would have to say Pump still, or sorry, yes, Pump, especially because, sorry, Get a Grip was 91,
93.
93. Yeah, it would be Pump because I think, although they all three have the production is great on all three of them. If I really did have to choose one, it would be that one just because 1989 was a memorable year. I mean, rock and roll ruled the airwaves in that year, and I mean, those songs were so big and so memorable, and and I remember those songs just like I remember. Maybe I'm a little nostalgic about that era, but like Sonic Temple by the Cult
Right.
was a big album around that time, and Doctor Feelgood, and just rock ruled, and Aerosmith was a big part of that, and I most definitely remember those days. I look back fondly on those days, so it would definitely be that one for me.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. So Pump would definitely be the critical consensus. That is most people's favorite of this era. And I think the reason is because it's it's definitely the rockiest or the heaviest of the three, and I think it probably harkens back to early Aerosmith. So I think a lot of early Aerosmith fans would pick that one, and I think a lot of new Aerosmith fans that heard of them would just know about that record just because it's so big, and it did have Janie's Got a Gun, Love in an Elevator, like What It Takes. I mean, so it did have a ton of.
Ragdoll too, was that on that one? Was it not?
No, Ragdoll was Permanent Vacation.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, yeah, so for me, like I'm definitely older Aerosmith guy, but I don't dislike these albums. I think they're well done, and yeah, I totally agree with you. The production is stellar. I mean, I was listening to this in my truck on the way to work, and I was blown away. I was like, whoa. Like this sounds so like just big. There's so much going on too, right? There's like a lot of horns, a lot of like kind of samples of the band, and just a lot of little things, right? So I'm pulling up the sales as of 2020. Permanent Vacation sold 7.5 million.
Jesus.
Pump sold 10.5 million,
Wow.
and Get a Grip sold 13 million.
So now that you've said that, can you think of another band that had such three killer big selling albums in a row ever?
I know. It's just
And not Guns N' Roses.
yeah, no, like yeah. I mean, the only other album so Aerosmith's greatest selling record is their greatest hits album, but that's not even too far away from Get a Grip. I think that sold 14.5 million. But yeah, I mean,
I'm thinking the only a band I can think of that might have come close would be Bon Jovi, because you had Slippery When Wet, then New Jersey,
yeah.
and then whatever one had Lay You Down in a Bed of Roses, which would have been 92, 93, which would have, and those were all mega huge albums.
And the crazy thing is, all those big records are probably Bruce Fairbairn as well, right? Like definitely New Jersey and Slippery When Wet is Bruce. Okay, here we go. I'll pull up Bon Jovi sales here as of 2020. Wow. Okay, so here we go. So keep the faith. Guess how many albums Keep the Faith sold? This was 92. Can you guess?
I'm gonna say 5 million.
8.5 million.
Wow.
Yeah, New Jersey. So New Jersey was 88. 14 million.
Jesus.
Okay, now this is what blew me away. You know, the Crossroads album.
That's Bon Jovi's greatest hits, right?
Is it the greatest hits? So that, but that was mid '90s, right? That was
I think it was maybe 94, maybe 95.
okay. 23 million.
Jesus Christ. Bon Jovi, you lucky bastard.
Yeah, and then Slippery When Wet, 24 million.
My
Yeah,
God.
yeah, nuts. So yeah, so Bon Jovi, like in the middle of the '90s, right?
Wow.
Selling 23 million records in the '90s. That's
Laughing all the way to the bank, that Bon Jovi.
yeah. They you know, it's like Nirvana didn't phase them, right? It's crazy, crazy. Okay, so for me, with these three records, so I'd say, so in my mind, like you know when you don't hear a record for a long time, you have just they're kind of in your head from the past several times that you've heard them. Like you sort of have an idea of how much you like something when you've heard them quite a few times. All these three records were all even for me. They were all maybe like an 8 out of 10. Like I thought they were all, you know, good, maybe 7.5, 8. But when I listened to each one last week or 2 weeks ago, and for me, two of them went up and one of them went down. So for me, Permanent Vacation and Pump actually went up because I was just so blown away by the production. But for me, Get a Grip actually went down a little bit, and I think the reason is I don't think that one aged quite as well. I think it sort of shows. I feel like Aerosmith is kind of becoming a caricature of themselves at that point. They're kind of being, and maybe the formula is starting to wear a little thin. That's just me, and I obviously didn't think that at the time. At the time, I loved that record. But yeah, listening to it in 2023, I don't think it has aged quite as well. But it's still, I mean, amazing. I have a lot of respect for all those ballads, even though I wouldn't put them on and listen to them for pure enjoyment anymore. I still respect them all. Right? There was Crazy, Crying, Amazing, and I guess you could even say that Living on the Edge was a quasi ballad as well, and that was a huge single too. Great video. And yeah, I agree with you.
Truth be told, too, Living on the Edge would be. I remember being a little tired of their formula, to be honest. And back then as well.
Okay.
But Living on the Edge it seemed to me like it had a little bit of balls in it. And I kind of thought that to me, it really just did seem like that they really did have a formula, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I tend to not like, it's funny. I really do like, you know, bands where if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But then,
Yeah.
you know, when it's just when you're that dominating on the charts and in the videos and all that, I did get a little tired of it. And Living on the Edge was pretty good. And I gotta say too, I absolutely hated that song from the Armageddon soundtrack about
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that song is awful.
Yeah.
And they love it. Like that is that's I think that was their only number one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And they were a little dismayed that they'd never had a number one hit. But Aerosmith didn't write that one, and I mean it's huge. The world loves it, but I mean I just hated that song from the second it came out. I still hate it. They still play that. I mean, Christ, they might play that one more than all the other Aerosmith songs on the radio as a whole. But I gotta say, I can't stand that one, anyways. But this thing isn't about that one song anyway.
But yeah. So for me, it's definitely between Pump and Permanent Vacation. But yeah, I think I'm gonna have to probably go with Permanent Vacation as my favorite. I think it's the most well, in my mind, I have the most pleasant memories of it for whatever reason, even though I heard Pump first. But yeah, for me, Permanent Vacation had the best production. I thought the production was the most interesting. I felt like it was the most creative. It was the first album with Bruce. So I think they weren't trying to copy themselves. They were going for something brand new with that record. Uh, Although I feel like Pump didn't copy it. Pump, that's what makes Pump so great, is that Pump was its own thing. Whereas I find Permanent Vacation is kind of copying. Sorry, whereas Get a Grip I find is copying those two records. Um, but yeah, I just find that Permanent Vacation just has a little bit more creativity for me. It's a little bit more colorful. I find Pump is great, but it's very kind of gray. It's a very rocky record. It's like just rock. Whereas like I think Permanent Vacation has a lot of colors to it. Um, it's not. It's got a lot of moods, right? It's got the heavy songs, but it's got the ballads like Angel. It's got really interesting sort of blues songs like Hangman Jury and St. John, and kind of weird songs like The Movie, but then kind of fun songs like Permanent Vacation and Girl Keeps Coming Apart and I'm Down. It's got some kind of I think I'm Down's a Beatles cover, I think. But yeah, I think it's just a really creative record. Yeah, and even Dude Looks Like a Lady. I mean, I don't really need to hear that song again. Not a huge fan of it, but it is very creative, right? It starts off with that weird, sample, and then like just really creative ways of like piecing a song together, right? It's very creative, yet it's still rock. It's like and then there's the horns, the big band thing, and yeah, I think it's just and I think also it's, I mean, probably besides Angel and Dude Looks Like a Lady, a lot of that album's not really played that much, so I don't hear a lot of it, so it's not overplayed, which is nice.
When you so
So
Jimmy, I want to redact my statement. Before Angel is a phenomenal ballad, and I can't think of many songs where Steven Tyler is as vocally, he gives everything he's got on that one. And if there's one song that really sticks out to me in all of those songs that I really always have liked, it would be that one. And it is a big monster rock ballad, but I can't think of a finer example of when Aerosmith is firing on all cylinders, where it works so well. And that was Permanent Vacation, correct, Angel?
yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna have to say Permanent Vacation for me, just because of that one. That I can remember. I mean, I can remember at school dances dancing with girls to that song, and you know, like this.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So
So
far apart. Yeah,
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 his vocal is top notch,
yeah.
and it really puts him in the upper echelon of rock singers. I mean, he's up there with Axl Rose on that one, and I can't think of a finer example of an Aerosmith song than that. To be honest, um, so I'm that that gets my vote. I really do need to listen to all three of them more, but
Yeah.
definitely Permanent Vacation. Now that I think about it, to be honest, I used to get confused between Crying and Angel, because all those ballads, they all kind of blend into each other,
Yeah.
and my
I
memory isn't my memory's not what it used to be either. So
I mean Angel is the ballad for sure. It is the most ballad of all of them too, right? It's like it's just yeah, it's just like here is the ballad. Here you go. Top this, right? This is our ballad, right? Yeah. Yeah, huge. And I mean all those
eat your heart out, Bon Jovi.
yeah. I mean all those 80s bands did that, right? They were like yeah, like they'd have like the one or two ballads in this probably pretty heavy rock album, right? So yeah, and then but then yeah, like that ballad would be like the hook that pulled everybody in. At least the ladies probably pulled them in more, right? Maybe pulled the parents in too.
And where the ladies start, the fellas join.
That's true. That's true. Cool, Jeff. Well, yeah. I mean, I like for me, it's just I mean, yeah, there's definitely a few throwaway tracks on Permanent Vacation that I don't really love, but I think just hearing it again, the production kind of just won me over anyway. So, songs like Samurai and, Magic Touch and Heart's Done Time, like these are kind of album tracks. I mean, they're still great, but like for me, they weren't really in my mind as really being huge songs, but when I hear the production, it's just wow. Yeah, like even the album tracks I don't really know much about or care much about just hit. Like the whole thing hits, right? Um and yeah, I mean that album became the formula for the rest of their career for sure. Um and it saved them. It absolutely saved them from oblivion too. So I mean, obviously they probably still walk this way, probably could have still sold their back catalog for them and stuff. But yeah, I mean, obviously all their massive hits came after Permanent Vacation. So, um,
And I'm glad we did this one because I had no idea that they sold as many records as they did. That was a real shocker to me that they were. But now that you mention it, it doesn't surprise me really because, like I said, those they were just those tracks were everywhere. And you know what? Now the more I think back to all the chicks in high school loved Aerosmith, right? All the rocker chicks loved Aerosmith. It makes sense. Um, I just I was listening to totally different stuff then, and I wasn't following that. So
yeah, for
it
sure.
does it comes a bit out of left field for me that they sold that many records. I had no idea they were so dominant in
Yeah, and I mean they were definitely the biggest comeback rock band. I mean, because you can think about other bands that did similar that had similar career trajectories than that they did. Like Alice Cooper comes to mind, right? He had a similar thing where he was really big in the '70s, and then just the drugs and the touring and the alcohol just like almost killed him. And then he came back in the '80s with this sort of new refined 80s thing, but he was like the old wise dad of the new rockers, right? I mean, if he was on tour with Guns N' Roses or with Megadeth or whatever, he would be like, he would be the wise guy or the wise kind of chief that would give them all advice.
Yeah, you're definitely right. He was the guy that your dad could dig,
Yeah,
because your dad probably liked him in the '70s, but
yeah,
it wasn't out of place to see him playing with with and all those bands loved his old stuff. You
yeah.
know, all those bands that we liked Alice Cooper. I mean, Alice Cooper was even on a GNR song, I think, wasn't he? On The Garden, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, it was. So I think Aerosmith kind of took a book from Alice Cooper. I mean, they were both doing the similar thing around the same time. Where I think Alice Cooper came back with Constrictor. That was '86. So it wasn't. I don't think that was huge, but yeah, like both artists did the similar thing. I mean, I guess to a certain extent you could say Ozzy was like that too, but I mean he was more successful in the early '80s though, and I
Yeah.
don't think he was ever not clean.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Well,
I
and
don't
I
think he
think
was ever clean. I think he was always still the partying rock and roller the entire time too, right? But
I think the only difference between Ozzy Osbourne is Ozzy was huge in the early '80s, and then he had that big comeback with "Mama, I'm Coming Home."
yep,
That was massive, and "No More Tears" also.
over 2 years.
Those are both from the same album, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. So Ozzy had one big comeback record, and Aerosmith just it kept going for them. Like
yep.
they had Permanent Vacation, and the wave of success, they just rode it all the way. Whereas Ozzy didn't really in the '90s. Ozzy wasn't relevant after Mama, I'm Coming Home and No More Tears. I can't think of anything he did, and there's nothing that's memorable to me.
Yeah, that was a huge record. I mean, so the Blizzard of Oz was massive. That was huge. That was 1980. Diary of a Madman was really big too. Uh,
Bark at the Moon.
multi-platinum. Yeah. Yeah. Bark at the Moon was big. Um, so the Ultimate Sin, not quite as big. I mean, still double platinum, still pretty big. No Rest for the Wicked. I mean, Ozzy never really went away. I mean, he was always big. Not huge like Aerosmith big, but or Bon Jovi big. But I mean, now No More Tears. How many albums did that sell? Yeah, yeah, that was kind of like it. It was twice as big as the last one, like four times platinum, five times platinum.
I believe Lemmy wrote. He either wrote "Mama, I'm Coming Home" or "No More Tears," if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he wrote. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, he wrote "Mama, I'm Coming Home." I don't want to change the world.
He said he made more money off writing for Ozzy than he did in his entire career for Motorhead.
Really? That's
Yeah.
awesome. Wow. Yeah, I mean Ozzy. I mean Osmosis did fairly well too, though. I think. Yeah, I mean that went double platinum, and that was 95.
I wouldn't have. I wouldn't
But
have thought that.
yeah. I mean it's. I mean Ozzy's not. I mean he's definitely not. I mean he is probably bigger now because of his celebrity status of his TV show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and of course Black Sabbath, right? I mean, yeah. I mean he has multiple streams of success.
Multiple revenue streams to draw from these days.
Yeah, oh, for sure. All right, Jeff. It sounds good. So yeah, I think that we definitely
I
lined
thought
up
of
on
our
this.
next epic debut, rock debut for 1997. Big Wreck versus Third Eye Blind.
I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna say Third Eye Blind. Yeah,
So,
perfect,
although
perfect. Yeah,
it's a good, the only reason why I thought Third Eye Blind would be good is because it's the debut.
yeah,
There are maybe those albums are a bit difficult to judge. One is certainly maybe heavier than the other, but in terms of rock debuts, and Third Eye Blind, I think was much bigger. I mean,
yeah.
Third Eye Blind was all over the charts, and Big Wreck. I mean, I don't know how many albums they sold. They were on the charts too. But anyway, the I can't think of another debut from that year. So I think
Third Eye
that's a
Blind.
good one.
That Third Eye Blind album is good. That's a good record.
I also personally think it's going to be a great battle because both of those records are so good.
Yeah.
And those are two bands that I love everything they've ever done, and I have every album all of those guys have ever done. So,
Done. All right. Okay, there we go. We've got our we've got our 1997 battle. I was I was gonna say NSYNC, but no. Cool. Yeah. No. I mean, I personally think those are their best records. Like, I don't think the band ever. I mean, they did good stuff after that, but I don't think they ever topped it. Um.
um, I would probably agree with you. I mean, I like a lot of their later stuff, but you're right in terms of. I mean, if you're going to call a spade, those ones had all the big hits,
Yeah.
and they were. That's where it all started. So,
Yeah.
and they also have the memories too, for that matter too, in terms of nostalgia. You know, if Third Eye Blind aren't closing with with How's It Gonna Be or Semi Charmed Life,
Oh yeah.
and Big Wreck aren't closing with My Luck Is Wasted,
Oh
I
yeah.
think I think you'd be hard pressed to find a show where they're not closing with those tunes still to this day. So
That's a good one, man. That's a good one. Yeah. So Big Wreck was. I mean, I don't think did Big Wreck. I mean, Big Wreck was Canadian, so it was not. It was nowhere near as big as the Third Eye Blind album. Yeah. No, I think it only went double platinum in Canada.
wow. Yeah, I wouldn't think they were a big force to be reckoned with in the States.
Interesting. That always oh but experienced creators that really both reached top 10. Okay, yeah, like that always confused me. Like even bands like Big Wreck and I Mother Earth, you know, it's
Mhm.
like bands that you would think would be so big, but they weren't really that big, right? They were just big. They were just kind of big in Canada, which is really not that big, right? In the
Yeah,
world.
it's not big at all. I mean,
But
platinum in Canada is 10 times less, right? It's only platinum's only 100,000 in
yeah,
Canada.
yeah. But you
So
hear you heard those albums so often because of CanCon, you just assume that, and they played alongside all the American bands, right? So yeah,
also, that being said, I think Big Wreck were half American. I think,
that's true. That's true.
but Third Eye Blind were all American.
Yeah, all American. Yeah, yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's a great one. That's a good one.
It's a battle for the ages, Jimmy.
It is. It definitely is. All right, Jeff. Sounds good. Okay, so yeah, we'll guess we'll just leave it there.